who won't be working. So this idea of stimulus is a great idea, but in order to stimulate the economy, but you can't stimulate your way out of a shutdown. You have to release the shutdown, then stimulate the workers who are now behind to help catch them up and get people working again. The problem is if you just keep sending stimulus checks, but people don't have an ability to actually go back and work and make an income, it does very little to change the economic picture.
Now, stock markets are on the rise. Dow Jones actually passed 30,000, and even Donald Trump called this weird. But people are not doing so good. So these stock market numbers, what do they really show? And why are they rising when all you're seeing is food lines throughout the whole country?
Well, that's the most important point. We're talking about economics in the United States right now. We have to talk about the fact that Wall Street and what happens in the stock market does not reflect what is happening in the lives of everyday people who, as you said, longer lines at shelters and food pantries than we have seen in decades. We have Americans who are out of work and don't know how they're going to put food on their table going into next year. We have businesses that are closing down in terms of their size and scope, and kids who can't go to school, and therefore their parents don't know what to do with a kid who's stuck at home all day long, having to do distance learning via Zoom. We have enormous problems on one side, and yet we have a stock market that's going up. And where are we really seeing the growth in the stock market? It's in tech companies. Tech companies are doing extremely well. Companies that are e-commerce like Amazon. Amazon has done extremely well during this time. But because one or two companies does extremely well and everyone wants to buy into these FANG stocks and they're so excited about them, does not reflect the fact that you have so many workers who are hurting and struggling. And this has been the disconnect that's been taking place really for decades in this country. A stock market that continues to climb to new highs and a population that is increasingly not just out of work, but unable to find gainful, meaningful employment for themselves and for the next generation on their way up. And that is a huge problem that that 30,000 number that you mentioned, which yes, is a absolute record. We have never hit 30,000 before in the stock market, the Dow Jones.
Exactly. And the only reason they have that 30,000 mark is because of these tech stocks, and the Congress gave $4.5 trillion out to these big bankers and Wall Streeters and all these tech companies. And they're buying back their stocks and doing things like that too, which is even increasing it further, which they're going to get back campaign donations or other, bribes back from these companies. And that was done through the Republican Congress. And some of the Dinos and the Democrats, which are quiet, they're real quiet about it. They don't say nothing at all. And that's the only reason the stocks are at, because they're doing the buybacks with that $4.5 trillion stimulus.
At the same time that we know so many people are hurting, it's almost disgusting to me to see those two things happening simultaneously.
And then what he's saying is that the small business owners didn't get their monies to help pay the workers like they were supposed to in the beginning. What they were talking, Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Chuck Schumer were all saying that they're going to give this money back to small businesses and have them pay, their employees while they were out during the coronavirus, and then keep the business going for the ones that will work and social distance, wear the mask, and do the right thing at their businesses, keep them going and coming up with different things, like if you drive up to the store and they come out with your package, like a restaurant or something would come out with your food, or Walmart or Home Depot would come out with your package. I still do that. If I buy a thing over anywhere, I have them, I call them in advance and ask them to bring it out to me. Or they have a system already set up where you have it brought out to you. I don't go in that store at all. So I wear my mask. I'm masked up if they come up to my car. Then I'll take it off as soon as they leave my car and my presence. I'll roll my window real quick and I'll move on. Go home, take a shower, wash my clothes, wash my mask, and dry it out with hot heat, hair blower, hair dryer, and so forth. But anyway, that's the only way I do business with people, and they ain't doing that much business like they were. So stocks shouldn't be going up. They should be even or going down somewhat, and they should have went down. But this is how they're keeping them up, is by that $4.5 trillion stimulus.
Well, interesting. Now, before COVID, of course, and this piggybacks on what you just said, we were reporting on the extreme income inequality in America. How do you think COVID has affected that situation, the inequality between rich and poor?
Well, let's put it this way. The 12 richest people in the world became significantly richer this year. So while the rest of America and the world,
And that's how they did it.
workers around the world became
Through the
increasingly poor,
$4.5
the
trillion
WHO
stimulus was the main
predicted
reason.
that worldwide, due to economic shutdowns, that those economic shutdowns, again, globally, may have doubled global poverty. Now think about that for a minute. That economic shutdowns around the world may have doubled global poverty. Simultaneously,
And that's right.
we know the 12 richest men in the world actually increased their wealth by about 200%
And
over
that's
the course
correct.
of this year. So we don't just have a wealth gap. We don't just have an inequality here. We have a growing
Have an-
gap.
have an
widening
advantage
between
gap.
those who are the
And they
wealthiest,
made it
most
like
powerful
that
people
in
society
Congress and for
those who are
multinational
just trying to
corporations
take
all
care
over the
of
world.
their families. And we're also talking about, Jesse, here, when I mentioned those numbers about seeing
For
that
themselves,
doubling
for
of
those
global poverty,
families,
that's not a problem for 1 year.
for those families
It's not a problem
involved.
for 2 or 3 years. That is a generational problem being created by the situation we're in. While again, we're seeing some very wealthy, very influential people only continuing to grow their wealth.
And they don't
during
work
this time.
hardly at
That's why
all.
The system, I think, is
They
so
don't work hard.
clearly
They don't
broken, not
sweat.
just in the United States,
They
but
don't
globally.
work out in the
Now,
hot
by the
heat
end of
or the
this
cold
year,
cold or anything
around
like that.
40 million
We're serving the
Americans
military.
might lose their homes. Several researchers, including ones done by MIT, warn that almost every fifth American could well be homeless. How is this possible in the largest, best economy in the world?
Well, it's pop.
Because the money was being made through the buybacks of the companies through that $4.5 trillion stimulus mainly. And there was still business going on where they were making profits, but they're hiding that within their profits, within their company somehow. And they weren't paying the workers like they said they were going to. They made this real sweet, like gave you a cavity kind of speech there in the beginning about they were going to give all this money to the small businesses and medium businesses, not to the big businesses. Well, the opposite happened. And they lied again. And that was some of the dinos in the Democratic Congress. But the Republican Congress had other plans anyway of beefing up their big bankers and big corporations because they all get campaign donations back from pharmaceuticals, from healthcare, from finance insurers, the defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, all these people.
Possible because of the fact that, again, we have an economy that is literally locking people out right now. You're not allowed to work in many cases. We've now been in lockdown.
And if you're working, the minimum wage, $10 an hour, you can't live off of it.
For the first few months, remember,
Or you're-
Congress put into place moratorium.
Or you're a restaurant worker, $2.15, I believe what it is still. And they can work as many as they want, but if people ain't coming in your restaurant worried about the COVID and everything like they used to be, coming in by the bunches each, like meal time, like breakfast and then lunch and then dinner. If they're not coming in by the bunches, they're only coming in by, you count like 5 couples coming in your business. That ain't enough to keep your doors open week after week. And in them restaurant, they're not getting their tips. Some of the people are too broke to leave even a good tip to these people, the waitresses that work there. So then they're only getting $2.15 an hour. So if they're there 5 hours, they're only getting $10.
To say you can't evict someone if they're in an apartment or they're in their home and they can't make their payments, they can't be evicted during this time. The problem is, Jesse, that ran out as of the end of July. Those moratoriums came to an end, and so we began to see the opportunity for evictions building up. Now, because Congress has abdicated and the U.S. Congress has sat home and decided not to get involved and not to actually push any bills through because they can't seem to come to an agreement on anything that actually helps the people, we have now, as you said, millions of people who may lose their homes or be forced out of their place of residents. And the other problem is it's not like, oh, well, hey, that was what was happening in July, but everything's back to normal, so give people some time to catch up. There's no time to catch up because we're still in the midst of a lockdown in many different states across the country. So if you weren't working before, you're likely still not working now. And who's looking out for you? Who's actually protecting you? And it's certainly not the men and women in the United States Congress.
Final question today, Ben. Another popular way they think to boost the economy in the U.S. is to launch a war that'll help boost contracts and employment and, of course, things of the war machine. Do you expect something like this could happen? We go to war?
There is a question of whether that will happen before President Trump comes out of office. I do not believe it will be the case before then. But once he is out of office and we see
Biden, the war hawk,
members of that Obama administration in the past come back in,
start being the cabinet,
those
two members
who were warmongers and war hawks themselves,
to
they
Biden.
believe that war does stimulate the economy, even though it does not.
The Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA families,
it stimulated the economy.
They know better too.
There is
It's only for them.
That says if we go to war, there are more jobs. It's not. The government contractors make lots of money. That is true.
It's only for them.
A teeny tiny portion of our economy, but a massive portion of our government budget being sent to a few companies.
Right.
So
and not even to the enlisted ranks, not to boost their money, their pay, who are actually doing the work.
Better than I do, Jesse. An enormous
making sure everybody's safe.
That loves war. It loves to overturn other countries. It loves to overthrow election results.
And they don't love to pay the enlisted ranks in the military.
Impose the U.S. military wherever it can, and it is a threat to people everywhere. But there's a real desire to see it happen in Washington from both Republicans and Democrats.
Ben, thank you for your time.
Corporate,
expertise.
controlled, and establishment Democrats and Republicans. The same snake, but two different heads.